Hello, I'm Earl Weinberg, and this is Book Circle Presents An Ever-Mounted Cavalry. Our heroes, Miss Blackholt and Lieutenant Fletcher, are in London to do a magical deal. They're dealing with Mr. Wendell and his friend, the gremlin Jib, and they're paying good gold for some very unprepossessing objects, which we know to be clippings from horses' hooves. Fletcher, meanwhile, was extracting his own bag from an inside pocket of his jacket. It was dark blue velvet. He placed it on the desk with a chink that satisfied the ear. Jib tugged the bag open and pulled out a thick gold coin large enough to be a tea saucer for him. He chuckled. "Lot prettier than what we have for you." "And worth 100 sestines each of them," Fletcher said. "Please count them." While Jib did this, Mr. Wendell said, "I am so terribly sorry things worked out this way," for he had been a go-between for Grand Normandy and the Thessalonians. "No blame attaches to you," Fletcher replied. "It all goes to the Thessalonians themselves. But can you throw any light on their behavior?" Well, we can only say that I do not think they're very unified. I doubt there is a Thessalonian king or empire. My contact is not very forthcoming. You know how it is." Fletcher and Miss Blackholt both nodded resignedly. Different societies of the Sundered world were almost as secret from each other as the Sundered world was from the unsundered. "So the Thessalonians we've met may be a nastier lot than the Thessalonians you've met?" Fletcher asked. "Perhaps. On a related note, or it may be that, you should know that someone is wandering Canary Wharf asking after a pair of Grand Normans." "We was down at the Mermaid's Purse," Jib said as he counted, "and this fella comes in, goes from table to table, asking after Grand Normans, a man and a woman. Said he wanted to do business with 'em, going on all friendly like. No one believed him." "Clumsy," Fletcher remarked. "Over-eager or rushed." Mr. Wendell nodded. "He seemed it. He was hot and sweating. Very hot. I could feel it coming off him when he came to my table, as if he had been running, though he did not breathe heavily." "Smelled funny, too," the gremlin said. "Like antifreeze. Couldn't get much else off him. He was warded up tight." "Did he see you?" asked Miss Blackholt. Jib and Mr. Wendell both smiled. "I wear a nice large coat," said Mr. Wendell, "and I'm told the view from the collar is good." "All correct," Jib announced, finishing his counting. "Thank you kindly. And here's your bag of troll boogers, or whatever they are." He shoved the burlap bag to the edge of the desk. Miss Blackholt smiled and took possession of it. "What did this friendly fellow look like?" Fletcher asked. "Tall, short, fat, thin?" "Tall and thin," said Mr. Wendell, "or lean, blond or light brown, dressed in brown tweed. Do you know him?" he asked when Fletcher and Miss Blackholt traded glances. "Just seen him," said Fletcher, "and he us. Thank you for the warning. As for yourselves, can you leave soon?" "We did not mean to," Mr. Wendell answered, "but it might be wise." Fletcher followed his gaze out the window toward the mouth of the Thames and beyond to the Nazi-haunted North Sea. "But you could dodge them with the right kind of help." "Ho for the Dogger Passage?" Fletcher asked. Indeed. Ages ago, the Dogger Bank had been dry land, and in the depths of its forests there had been a passage from this world. The great ice had melted, the sea had risen, but those who valued the passage had adapted, and you could still sail off the world from the right patch of sea if you had the right kind of help. The crew of the Lucine included a water fay, a Nix. The two Grand Normans thanked Jib and Mr. Wendell, wished them bon voyage, and left. They were away from the docks and among the warehouses when Fletcher reflected, "I can think of another reason for that Ahnenerberer to be asking about us so openly, besides being rushed or too eager. He could be challenging us. calling us out. And why would we accept such a challenge? To be rid of him. He must think he would win such an encounter. He is mistaken. He doesn't know he is up against the next court mage of Grand Normandy. Miss Blackholt felt her face grow cold and wondered if there was any visible change to her glamour. But the court mage would certainly have to play the game of magical espionage, and she did not want to look timid to Fletcher. She respected him, even liked him, and he was, after all, an agent of the Vanguard, and so qualified to judge her playing of this game. Still, is it worth the risk? It could be worth much more than taking out a single agent. He's working some strange tricks. It could be well worthwhile to learn what they are. With a little luck, we could learn much more. I assume you are ghost sensitive? What? Annerba agent Übersoldat Otto Schreiber-Widmann Klein finally sighted his quarry when he returned to the mermaid's purse. They were just leaving. A tallish, dark-haired woman with her hair in a crown of braiding, and a middling, sandy-haired man, both in undistinguished long coats, both carrying briefcases. The briefcases interested him mightily. Capturing the Grand Normans rather than just killing them would be a great plus. He readied the 2 stilettos with a paralytic poison. It looked as if his partner would not find him before the strike. That made it a little more difficult, but left more glory for him. He was content. He followed them through Canary Wharf at as great a distance as possible, changing cloth cap for knit cap, doffing and resuming scarf in different combinations. It was too bad he was now so tall. It was also too bad he could not use glamour, but he had to stay warded. They had not looked back at him, they were not so foolish, but he thought there was a tension in their walk, a hunch to their shoulders. The time was approaching. Did he have enough energy? He ought. He had bought and drunk a tin of kerosene less than 2 hours ago. When he reached within to bring the energy up, it came readily. There was no one else in view. Now. Combining speed and stealth, he sprinted silently up behind the cringing couple, stilettos at the ready. At the last fraction of the last moment, he felt there was something wrong, but he was committed to the attack. He stabbed both simultaneously, and simultaneously both figures vanished like extinguished flames, like popped balloons. His stilettos were tangled in strips of fine white silk. He would not have heard the shot through the silencer had his senses not been heightened by the energy. He felt the blow to his back, the pain, but not enough pain, and the sudden, shocking emptiness in his lower body. As he fell, he realized what the wrong something had been. His quarry's faces, glimpsed from the side as he overtook them, had shown no emotion. "That was brilliant glamour work," said Fletcher as he and Miss Blackholt came sprinting up, almost into the positions of their recent images. "Thank you. I was not at all sure their autonomy would work properly so far from me and out of eyeshot. That was brilliant shooting. He is terrifying. Did you see how fast he ran?" And silently, yes. Fletcher looked about, but there was still no one else in view. People sometimes said the sundering kept mundane witnesses away from sights like falcon-fast attackers and vanishing victims. But now there was just a body and them. The sundering's blessing, if there had been any, was gone now. He grabbed one of the Annerber's arms. Miss Blackholt grabbed the other, and they dragged him into an alley. He groaned. They propped him up in a doorway. Fletcher dragged a couple of dustbins into position flanking the doorway, giving a bit of cover, while Miss Blackholt looked over their catch. "He's feverish," she said, "more than feverish, hotter than anyone I've seen. I almost want to say he is cooking. And yet he is pale and getting paler. He may well be dying." "Okay," muttered Fletcher. He was busy frisking the man. "I don't know if he smells like antifreeze, as the gremlin said," she continued, feeling for a pulse and finding it racing, "because I do not know what antifreeze smells like, But he certainly smells strange. Fletcher nodded agreement. The rapid panting is very strange under the circumstances. It's too deep. Have you found his wards yet? Fletcher reached into the man's collar and yanked out a chain bearing what looked like a heavy-duty soldier's dog tag, about twice as long as normal. It was made of lead and inscribed with runes. Then he worked at the waist and pulled off the belt. Finally, he pulled off a plain steel ring on the left little finger. If there's more, he said, there are probably 9 in total. They like that number, do luck work with it. Hope he didn't swallow one, but I think he's clear now. Yes, I think so. She looked at Fletcher's face, pale and set. It must match her own. Have you done anything like this before? Hunted a man down with murderous intent? No. He spoke low and rapidly in Chenolese. Got involved in some gun tag, twice in Lyon and once in Manchester, but I didn't have anyone particular in mind. Don't think I hit anyone. Didn't even shoot that often. Not much of a spy, eh? By now he had relieved the Ahnenerbe of a gun, a knife, and a wallet with a false ID in it. I'm sure real espionage is not very cinematic. He nodded. Where are the knives he attacked our images with? They must be back on the street. I will fetch them. When she got back, Fletcher had the man's left pants leg rolled up and a tourniquet tied below the knee. He isn't bleeding, she observed. He will be. I'm going to open his anterior tibial artery, then turn it on and off with the tourniquet. Between that and the internal bleeding that's probably going on, I'll have some control over the speed of death. And since I got him in the spine, I don't think he will feel it. Suspect nothing. Before I get to work, do you want to look him over carefully? Miss Blackholt nodded. She gazed at the man in an unfocused way and surveyed him without wards. There is something alchemical going on in his torso, his stomach and entrails, I presume. Some oaths and geases, as to be expected. Odd healing magic with an alchemic tinge going on in several places. There's one here. She leaned down and opened the man's shirt collar. There was a neat red surgical scar running below the base of his neck, just above the curve of the collarbone. The skin below was even paler than that above and heavily freckled. She met Fletcher's gaze, then looked at the exposed leg. Despite having hidden in trousers all winter, the skin was darker than the face, dusted with lank black hair. She lifted his left hand and pushed back the sleeve. The forearm matched the leg. The legs twitched. I thought I got him in the spine, said Fletcher. He's healing. There are charms ramping up all through him. Right then. He seized the man's knife and pointed with it on the leg. Here? How should I know? Miss Blackholt opened her bag and rummaged. You're the one with actual medical training. I barely know first aid. And, last. I think so, yes. She pulled out a rowan wood wand and started pushing back on the healing magic that was rousing in the man. Working against healing was nothing she was trained in. Fletcher stabbed. Blood jetted. The man did not react, so the nerves were not healed yet. He leaned close to the man's ear and said, Mein Freund, kannst du mich hören? My friend, can you hear me? He moaned a little. Mein Freund, hör mir zu. Wir brauchen dich, zart zu sein. Bei uns zu bleiben. My friend, listen to me. We need you to be strong, to stay with us. The moan was more of a grunt. Wie heißt du, Freund? What is your name, friend? Miss Blackwood gave up on trying to invent anti-healing on the spot and instead began to improvise a general counter-magical ward. Whatever Fletcher was doing, it was not magic. A ward would not interfere. With a free corner of her mind, she wondered somewhat at his performance. She knew roughly what the game was, but had expected him to sound smooth, beguiling, slick. That, she now saw, was amateurish. Instead, he sounded anxious, earnest, concerned. Such tones might Brother Eugene use to encourage a wounded soldier. But however it was played, the game was to urge him to cling to life. If he did, it bettered the odds he would linger as a ghost. Wie heißt dein Name? A pleading note. Otto. Otto, bleib bei uns, Otto. Sieh stark. Denke an dein Zuhause, Otto. Denke an Sonnenlicht, an frische Lüfte, an Lachen und Tränen. Des Leben. Bleibe bei uns, Otto. Otto, stay with us, Otto. Be strong. Think of your home, Otto. Think of sunlight, of fresh air, of laughter and tears, of life. Stay with us, Otto. And while he made this plea, he opened the artery. Miss Blackholt felt something hot and corrosive try to kindle in the man's belly. She pushed it down. Now came the death rattle. They were both ghost-sensitive. Both perceived a little clot of mist start out of his mouth, like a puff of warm breath on a frosty morning, but a bit more cohesive. Fletcher lunged forward and inhaled. Now, the impulse to vomit, never far this long while, rose again. Fletcher encouraged it, but at the peak he coughed instead. He felt the thing pass out of him like hot phlegm. Immediately he felt tired, weak, therefore a bit calmer, but he remembered a patch of dim light hung before his face, contrasting with the darkness. Go, he told it. Go in peace. Go to hell. Go, go. With a familiar scratching noise, a match flared. A white hand, feminine, golden in the flamelight, brought it up to the patch of mist, now invisible in the brighter light. There was a little flare. The hand shook the match out, and there was no mist. Drink this. She pressed a small bottle into his hand. He gulped gladly. Cool water. Physically, it was just water. Sleep. Wake now. With a jolt, Fletcher came to himself. He was chilly, stiff, and weak. He was sitting on the cold stoop of the door in the alley. The dustbins flanked him, giving their inadequate cover. Miss Blackholt stood opposite him. They were alone. The light was early evening. How are you feeling? She asked. Cold, tired, not too bad. I had a nightmare. Oh, of course I did. Don't think about that. You don't ever have to think about it again. Thank you. I still feel like I need a bath. Inside. Where is he? If you mean the body, she answered in a gray tone, you threw it in the Thames when we were sure the coast was clear. As for the rest, he is gone wherever Ahnenerbe agents finally go. She leaned against the opposite wall. I threw him in the river? Don't try to remember it. By myself? He was bigger than me, by a lot. Didn't I need your help? I told you to hold the body close, keep your back straight, and lift with your knees so as not to sprain anything. That was the extent of my help. I am not at all sure you heard me. You were agitated. Raving, really. She stood, sighed, and massaged the small of her back. He looked around again. How long have we been here? Most of the afternoon. Just one afternoon? I remember night, darkness anyway. I thickened shadow and muffled sound in the alley so you could rant in peace. Did we learn anything? Well, did you learn anything? Oh, yes, you raved to a purpose, and I took down the relevant bits. We must report immediately. Now, I'm going to summarize my notes to you so multiple people know as soon as possible. You told me to do this. But try to hear it as fresh news. After you ejected the ghost, I gave you a hypnotic and told you to forget the experience. We don't want to work against that. You don't want to work against that. She thought to herself, and I would like to take a dose of hypnotic myself and have someone tell me to forget the nasty bits of raving between the relevant bits. Maybe he can do it for me later on the train. Fletcher nodded for her to go on. Do you remember examining him? She asked. Yes, he looked like a patchwork. He was. He is probably in the Ahnenerbe records as Otto Schreiber, but he called himself Otto Schreiber Widmann Klein, because Widmann and Klein were his biggest donors. Which, I suppose I'm curious, which was which? What was the distribution? Head and neck were Schreiber, of course. Skeleton and muscles below the neck were Widmann. Almost all of the viscera were Klein. So was skin on the front of the torso. But the stomach came from a wild boar and was full of some alchemical brew, and there were 2 additional pairs of adrenal glands. The liver had additional lobes and had been alchemically treated. I did not determine this by examination. You reported it to me from Schreiber's memory. Fletcher nodded. The whole reason for obtaining and inhaling Schreiber's ghost was because it made Schreiber's life pass before his eyes. Miss Blackholt carefully watched Fletcher for signs that the memories were returning. She also carefully did not remind him of Schreiber's anxiety that Widmann and Klein had not willed their bodies to science or been recovered from a morgue, but were simply harvested. Schreiber had been aware of a rumor that it was dangerous to be exceptionally healthy or athletic and come to the attention of the Ahnenerbe. Fletcher looked tired, grim, and queasy, but not haunted. Good. Miss Blackholt had certainly not studied this branch of the occult, but she had heard that normally the memories of a ghost's life faded from consciousness shortly after it was taken in, and dwindled to a vague, dreamlike impression once the ghost was expelled. But Fletcher had wanted to make sure, and perhaps to purify himself as best he could. Miss Blackholt understood entirely. She went on. He and his makers, handlers, called him an Übersoldat, a super soldier. And the important thing to note is that he is not the only one. They are manufacturing Übersoldaten at a base in the Black Forest. There are many dozens. They are to be used for special forces and espionage. And since Schreiber has disappeared, they will know that we know. And finally, remember that he had a partner. Ah, yes, the partner. Fletcher stared thoughtfully at the pavement of the alley. A little too thoughtfully, in Miss Blackholt's estimation. Don't try to remember him. I will tell you. She flipped through the notes. His name is Gustav Wolliger, and he is also an Übersoldat, but an earlier model. He has better heart and lungs, or so he believes, and more muscles spliced into arms, legs, and back. She turned a page. An extra set of adrenal glands, and the boar stomach. That seems to be standard equipment. So you speculated when you were ranting. Probably more amenable to their alchemical brew than a human stomach for some reason. So you said, stop thinking about them if you can. I don't mean for all this to come up again, said Fletcher, still gazing at the pavement. It's, cryptomnesia, hidden memory. What's this stuff? He pointed. There were large smears of blood at his feet, but overlapping them were smears of something clear. It leaked out of him when you carried him off, along with a lot of the blood. It smells like paraffin. Kerosene, Fletcher muttered, giving the German name. He drank some not long before. So you said, stop it. Change the subject. We need to in any case. What next? Fletcher looked up, mischief in his face. Miss Blackwood supposed that was good. We could try it again, he proposed. What, follow our mirages around Canary Wharf in hopes of their being attacked? Is there a reason it wouldn't work again? Miss Blackholt considered. No, but I thought you would propose the quickest way to deliver our information. Surely that and our supplies are more important than dueling with the Ahnenerbe. Fletcher looked a little abashed. You're right, of course. We need to report to the Vanguard office in the square mile. He brightened again. But we might do both at once, at least until we get into more populated areas. Are you up for it? Miss Blackholt considered again. He was the security officer, after all, and she did not want to seem the shrinking wet-blanket female. She wondered if he had conceived a personal hatred for Ubersoldaten. It would be perfectly natural. She felt the same herself. On that reflection, she rummaged in her bag again and pulled out another little bottle. She opened it and drank. Now I am up for it. She passed an identical bottle to Fletcher. Elixir? She nodded. He took it and drank. Whew! What did you use as the base? An elixir was a potion that restored your magical energies. It could be anything drinkable, even mere water, but there was a general feeling or tradition that potions should be based on appropriate liquids. It made the casting easier and surer. What did you expect, herbal tea? It's mint liqueur. Hits the spot. Lead on. And we'll find where she leads and what comes next time.